Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everyone to the webinar, Planning Energy Livelihood Interventions in Humanitarian Settings, Tools and Delivery Models. My name is Ranisha Basnet, and today I'll be your moderator for this webinar. So hopefully you can also see me. This webinar is organized jointly by ICRC, Energypedia, Selco Foundation, and Humanitarian GPA, and is part of an ongoing webinar series where we are looking at productive uses of energy, specifically in humanitarian contexts. So we kicked off the series in early March, where we had our first webinar, Understanding the Energy Livelihood Nexus. We had presentations looking at energy and discussions looking at challenges and opportunities in humanitarian settings. Today, we are going to dive deeper and understand what are the delivery models and tools that you could use to plan such an intervention. And we hope you'll join us for our third webinar on 29th March, where we are then going to look at the energy, finance, market linkage, and stakeholder rules and the supply chains. So my colleague will drop the link for the third webinar in the chat, so you can also register already for the third webinar, and we hope you'll join us. And the overall aim of the series is really to spark discussion and promote knowledge sharing on the topic of productive uses, especially for a humanitarian context. So a quick look at housekeeping for today. So we are taking in all of your questions. So please type your questions in a question tab or chat tab that should open up in your screen. And in case you are logging in from using a mobile device, you will have a question mark icon. So if you click on that, you'll be able to send us like a chat message or question message. And please do tell us to whom the question is addressed, because we have a stellar lineup of panel today. So it would be great to know to whom the question is addressed so that we can send it to the appropriate person. So moving forward, let's have a look at our agenda for today. So today we will kickstart with an introduction presentation from Savab Jaferi from Selco Foundation. He's going to give us intro into what are the tools that one could use for energy livelihood program design. Then we will move to a presentation from Danish Refugee Council Tanzania, where we will have an example of energy livelihood planning and interventions. What could they look like? And then we'll have a panel discussion section, which is going to be moderated by Sahab, where we are going to then go in detail with the panelists, that is Andrea Ranzazzini from Hum Energy, Fazli from Enbo, Amy from UNITA, and Robert from Danish Refugee Council Tanzania. We are going to then dig deeper into what are the different delivery models. So stay tuned for that. So with that, I'm very happy to invite our first presenter for today, Sahab Jaferi from Selco Foundation. Sahab is currently working as a program manager and has more than 10 years of experience in the development and communication sector. And today he's going to talk about what are the tools for energy livelihood interventions. So Sahab, I'm going to send you a request so that you can share your screen shortly.
Thank you,
Ranisha. Perfect. We can see you, and if you could share your screen, we can also begin with the presentation. We see your screen, so if you could go full screen, then we can continue.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Shahab, and I work at the Selco Foundation, where a non-profit organization based out of India. And we've been working in the decentralized renewable energy sector in the livelihood space and in the healthcare space for about 10 to 12 years now. And what we've been able to do is innovate on many different livelihood and energy use cases where communities have been able to utilize technology, financing, and many other services to develop their livelihoods using decentralized renewable energy. And herein we've had a lot of different learnings that we think that would be apt to share with all of you who are interested in livelihood and energy. planning. We've also engaged with the Unitarian GPA in co-designing activities for DRE and livelihood planning from a humanitarian context, and we have some lessons therein as well. So with that, I can share those learnings with you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Please leave them in the chat box or question. So before I dive right into the tools itself or the specific approaches that we have, I thought that it would be appropriate to speak about larger approaches to program building and solution building, as well as the mindset that one goes in with when looking at livelihoods and decentralized renewable energy together. Many a times we see that um, technology choices, either within the energy space or within the livelihood space, the hardware technologies or the energy system technologies, they are prioritized and first considered while entering a planning exercise. This hampers the sustainability of a livelihood program greatly. To develop a livelihood and technology linked program, livelihood programs need to be considered first, ideally, and then technology and renewable energy solutions are designed according to the livelihood needs that are being projected. This ensures sustainability, and this is more important while innovating for solutions, especially in new contexts where an understanding of what exactly would be required is not known. So looking at livelihood needs first, then building in technology, looking at financial models and ownership models is more appropriate rather than going for a easy to scale cookie cutter approach, which doesn't make a lot of consideration on viability of the livelihood itself. However, having said that, taking a more bottom-up, demand-driven approach requires dedicated personnel with specific capacity, and this webinar series is a means to build that capacity as well of how this joint planning can be carried out. So with that, let me start on the livelihood front, and this is true for a lot of different communities in the global south, including communities in humanitarian contexts, that there are different livelihood types that do emerge as humanitarian communities spend more time in their local areas. They occupy certain types of livelihood, so they could be providing services to other refugee community members. They could be trading in goods, either purchased from the market or purchased locally. Those goods that are purchased, manufactured locally, can be traded. Goods are also manufactured or value added to or processed. These could be agriculture, or it could be more secondary or tertiary occupations like textile manufacturing or tailoring. And then, of course, people spend, especially after a point in time, after they've been protracted or living in a space for longer, they take up more primary production activities. We've seen poultry and goatry being acceptable or readily available livelihoods for a lot of landless communities, communities that have little land ownership or control. And energy plays a role in all of these. It can help provide new services, or it can help reduce costs in many livelihoods. It can improve the delivery of certain livelihoods. It can reduce the drudgery that is involved, improve productivity, and so on. And then there are a lot of different examples which I already mentioned, that many different communities across the global south do take up. You'll find such in many different contexts, albeit with contextual differences, of course. And here are some examples. But how do you go about building DRE livelihood solutions, keeping for these particular livelihoods? And the first step to that, and I'm speaking more from a regional perspective or an area into consideration. So it could be a settlement, or it could be a larger country, and you could scale up the process accordingly. And The processes that are used are from a planner's perspective. So you're expected to be a joint energy as well as a livelihood planner while considering some of these things to ensure that your solution is as innovative as possible, as appropriate as possible, and so on. So the first step when starting off is to gain a good understanding, at least from available literature or from interviews with key stakeholders, um, that what have been the past livelihood activities in that particular area of focus. Livelihood activities or financing programs that have been carried out that promote income generation, and so on. You should also gain an understanding of what are the past energy programs that have been carried out. We should be seeking from both learnings as on successes as well as on challenges that have been faced, so that you can build for those challenges more appropriately while going forward, and make use of the opportunities that have been highlighted, and not even repeat or rebuild the wheel, as it is said. And by speaking to stakeholders, and we do this usually through stakeholder consultations, we bring in financial actors, livelihood developers, energy actors, and we ask them how do they prioritize some of these activities, and that brings in a lot of clarity while building a new program. What would also be interesting to know at this stage is what are the livelihoods that are being practiced, some of which we spoke already, but gaining a good understanding of some of these livelihoods that are being practiced. What are the already existing energy needs that are visible, that well people are already utilizing energy in some form, either through a diesel generator or through by paying a certain amount that is expensive to them, maybe on kerosene or on candles and so on, and try to gain an understanding of the economics as well as the functional characteristics of those livelihoods. You could displace current energy needs as well as look for future energy needs. So how can their livelihood be augmented specifically? And then the next step after you've understood a lot of this is developing the solution. And the solution is threefold. You are building for the technology and the energy system that is required. You're looking at the economics, and you're also looking at the ownership and the utilization. With that and the knowledge of who the stakeholders are in that particular region, you can go ahead and plan a joint program with these stakeholders, and then therein build for ecosystem needs, which I'll speak about, and then also look at phasing and budgeting of the program. So really quickly, the first step to solution design is looking at technology models. Once you've understood the livelihood needs, the specific output needs, the specific capacity needs, you can, and by understanding the the specific needs of the user. So say it's a food processing activity that you're looking at, then what is the food being cooked is the first question. Once you gain a knowledge of that, you can go out and look for technologies that suit those needs. These technologies could be available, not available, need to be imported, and so on. Many of those considerations will define the success of the program or the future way forward. Once you've had the technology in mind and you know the power consumption of the technology, you can go out and build for decentralized renewable energy system designs that meet the needs of those technologies. For this, you need to know how long the machine needs to run that is being considered, what are the local weather conditions, and how is this being utilized, say, throughout a year, where it might not be utilized throughout the year and you might want to add on or optimize it further and add on another machine and so on. You can also look at the infrastructure. Where is the machine going to be housed and utilized? Some things to take in consideration here is, is the technology locally available? Are there spare parts in case something breaks down? Who is installing the system? Are these suppliers locally present? What cost are they offering it vis-a-vis others that might be located elsewhere? Um, and how is this system being maintained? The next step is to look at financing, and we have our next speaker from the DRC who might be able to share a lot more about this, and I'm looking forward to that. And here, one again, livelihood needs stand at the center. we need to understand how the livelihood is economically impacting, or the technology provision that you are adding on with the energy provision. How is it impacting the business? Is it starting a new business, or is it creating a change in the existing business? And once you've established the cost of that particular technology, you can look at how um, how profitable or viable it is already. In case of more vulnerable communities where technology and energy provisions are required, but the market might be limited, or it might require some time to grow, you can build in gap financing and use blended financing models to make systems affordable for specifically vulnerable communities. And you can.
Sahab, you only have 2 minutes
Yes.
left now, so if you could
Okay.
wrap it up in
Okay.
two
I'm
minutes.
almost done. Yes. 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 Thank you. And then you come up with the financial products. Once you've established the financing requirements, the blended finance, the gap subsidies, and so on. And lastly, you understand the ownership models. Is this an individual that's owning it? Is it better if a group, or a small group, a group of 3 to 5, or or a group, a cooperative of all members can own this particular system? And of course, these groups need to be formal so that there can be checks and balances in the management. If communities are highly vulnerable or in disaster context, some solutions may have to be institution owned, or fully subsidized, provided to an entrepreneur who owns it, but or institution owned and with pay per use services, so that you can still extend services to communities. This is my last slide, and here I'd like to focus on what ensures sustainability of livelihood and energy. And we of course know that technology solutions are required, and we're looking at technology and energy providers. But it's also important to really look at the financial uh, ecosystem, and say what are the kind of financial products that are already available for the communities in question in that local area, and who's providing them, and how can we build onto them. What is the policy environment? What is the policy environment for livelihoods and for energy? How are markets currently operating with the communities in question? How do they bring in raw materials? How do they ship out finished products? And how capacitated is there? Who are they? Who works with them? What kind of organizations are building livelihoods with communities? Each of these parts of the ecosystem can go ahead and build the rest of the ecosystem as well, either by extending themselves to other parts, or by bringing in other people that make for, and all of this together makes for long-term programming. With this, and with this remark, I'd also like to bring in the next speaker, and Renisha, over to you for the same.
Thank you so much, and also giving us an overview, especially talking about the value chain. And we want to proceed with our second speaker for today, who is now going to dive deeper into examples. So I would like to welcome Robert Munz from Danish Refugee Council, Tanzania. Robert is the DRC's livelihood team expert and has been working in DRC, Tanzania for 6 years, engaged in both humanitarian development projects. So Robert, the floor is yours. So if you could unmute yourself, I will also send you a request to share your screen.
Yes, Ranisha. I think
Perfect. We can hear you. So if you could accept my request, we can also begin with the presentation.
okay, thank you. Yes, Ranisha, I hope you can just see my screen.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. As per my introduction from Ranisha, this is a Danish Refugee Council, Tanzania. We're just sharing our experience around energy and livelihood in a humanitarian setting. So I'll just be, in my presentation, I'll be having some sort of introduction and then highlights around energy and livelihoods. And then we'll be having some highlights around financial inclusion programming, and then challenges, and then later on we ended up with some key lessons learned. Let me start actually by giving the general overview of Danish Refugee Council. Danish Refugee Council, we are operating in Tanzania, and then we have been implementing our activities in 3 refugee camps. The first one is Mtendeli, Nduta, and Nyarugusu, as you can see. These 2 refugee camps from Nduta and Mtendeli is hosting the Burundian refugees, but this Nyarugusu refugee camps is mainly for the Congolese population. And then Danish Refugee Council, also we are operating in Bujumbura recently. We're still implementing some livelihood and protection interventions. So the Danish Refugee Council experience around energy and livelihoods, I'll be starting actually with this. As you can see from my presentations, here in Tanzania, we are running the centers known as multi-purpose community centers. These centers actually, they are just solarized, as you can see from the presentations. And then inside it, you are just running the computer classes where students, they can go and have access to different online learning platforms such as Coursera. Also refugees, and it's a point also for refugees and host community beneficiaries, they can just interact. So these centers, they've been solarized, and then they are mainly used for ICT learning platforms. And then around green initiatives, also as DRC through Danida funding, we're also implementing what we call the production of biobriquettes. But due to the nature of our refugee camps actually here in Tanzania, there is a limited availability for raw material for production of these biobriquettes. So what we are doing, we've been also applying what we are calling the cash for work model. So the raw material for biobriquette production, they normally came from the host community through a cash for work. And then out of this cash for work kind of related programming, we can see that we're also contributing to the building of the local economies. Also, we are adding value actually for agriculture bioproducts such as maize cobs and rice husk. So these are some of the initiatives which as DRC Tanzania implementing around the green initiative through production of biobriquettes. And then on the side of energy and livelihood as well, through Phillips Foundation. This is a private company actually for us DRC Tanzania have been working with. As you can see here, this is a solar container. It has been solarized on top of it, and then inside these solar containers, we've been running what we call the IGAs, the income generating activities, which involve the utilization of these installed solar systems. Also, out of this solarized system, also they can be integrated with other interventions such as wash. Out of these pictures, you can just observe that. You can see this pole actually, this is meant for public lighting. Out of these solarized containers, we can also have some sort of public lightings, and then inside here, solar kiosk is where we are running the IGAs, which involve utilization of the solar, such as phone charging, phone repair. And then out of this solarized platform, we can also have access to water. So these solar systems have been linked with the water pumps, where the host community beneficiaries, they can have access to good and clean water as well. And then this is just some of the IGAs which have been carried out inside these solar containers that involve the utilization of this solar energy, such as solar charging, as I said, and phone repairs. Also, with our partnership with the Phillips Foundation, also we had a component actually of training the local population. We call them local technicians. This helps a lot actually in case of maintenance and ensuring sustainability of this kind of assets. Also, out of these IGAs, as I said, which are carried out inside these solar containers, the communities, they can have access to income, and then they can also reinvest it for the maintenance of solar system where needed actually. And then with our partnership with Phillips Foundation, we've been implementing quite a number of projects. As from the first slide, actually, you can just see, this is what we call the public lighting, particularly for the marketplaces, so as to increase the operation hours for the markets. We are also supporting the vulnerable household, as you can see there. The vulnerable households have been supported with what we call the solar lanterns. Actually, they can be used at household level. And then also, we touch at some point the business community, the business vendors, as you can see. For the business vendors, actually, they've increased their working hours. Also, they can also charging their mobile phones, where they can have several kind of communications with their fellow, the wholesalers actually, mainly for the issue of buying the stocks to fill in their shops actually. Yeah, so I'll just take you through as well on the side of financial inclusion programming. Also, this is an area that at DRC Tanzania we've been working around. We've been working actually with the UNCDF, and so far we've been able to formulate around 507 groups. Actually, our implementation model, we've been relying on what we call the care model. This is a mainly model that is practically based in our context. Based on the nature of the designing, we have been dealing actually with the refugees as well as the host community population, in particular for farmers, to ensure that access to financial services for farmers. And then as part of our implementation, we are also providing the different kind of trainings. The first one being around the 7 group operation, financial education, as well as for business skills and entrepreneurship. And then later on followed by distribution of what we call the saving kits, the VSL kits, so as to ensure the security for the funds, for the saving funds actually. And then later on we proceed with what we call the monitoring and provision of technical support. But at some point we saw that also this kind of intervention, it has also having some sort of positive correlation with the utilization of the solar energy, particularly for the installed solar containers, because in our trainings we've been also accompanied with the digital kind of platforms such as tablets, particularly for financial education and digital literacy. We do have tablets which have been equipped with the different content around financial education, and then so we do have some sort of synergy with the energy, because once the farmers they've been interacting with these tablets, at some point they'll need actually to charge them. So we are providing some sort of synergy where they can go on the same solar containers, where they can just go and charge their tablets so that they can proceed with the different learning modules actually. And then in our context, actually, I just wanted to give a general overview around the challenges and lessons learned that we've been experiencing along the way. The first challenge actually is on the unpredictable government directives. In our refugee camps, actually, recently we've been receiving quite a number of government directives, which at some point we saw that it might lead into the limit actually business opportunities based on the nature of our context actually. With our partnership with Phillips Foundation, we wish to have a lot of creativity around this solar energy, like some of the models like pay as you go. We wanted to have them, the issue of renting these solar lanterns, but due to this unpredictable government directive, we couldn't actually make it. But we saw that it could be an opportunity also for the refugees to have access to all these kind of platforms. But due to these directives, based on our context, actually, it's not yet possible to have it. Also, around the issue of energy and the issue of energy in our refugee camps, actually, the main source of energy has been firewood. So we saw that the need is actually very high compared to the current support for the agents which are dealing with the production of biobridges. We are very few actually. So we wish we have more partners who are addressing this issue of energy. And then on the side of lesson learned, we saw that this solar energy has a great potential actually in reducing the issue of carbon footprint, because these are environmental friendly actually, I can just say in general. And then the issue of cash for work is a very nice kind of programming, because it builds the local communities, because even the local communities, they feel to be included in some of the projects which are related to refugees, because the economy is also being built at some point. Also, the issue of including the host communities, because most of our refugee camps are very closely to these host communities. So including the host community in this kind of interventions, it isn't the tension between these two populations, the refugees and the host community actually, because the host community population feels to be part of the interventions which are directed to refugees. So these are just some of the key lessons learned that DRC Tanzania we've been able to observe. I think that's all from DRC Tanzania. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robert. I would then quickly switch back to my screen. And if you have any question to either Sahab or Robert, please type in the chat and then we will address during the Q&A round. And now we are moving to the second half of our webinar where we will have a panel discussion diving deeper into the topic at hand. And for that, I would like to pass on to my colleague Sahab from Selco Foundation, who is going to then moderate the panel discussion. So Sahab, over to you. You are muted, so we can't hear you.
Thank you, Ranisha, and welcome to all of you again. Amy, Fazle, Andrea, and Robert, could you all please turn on your cameras? Hi, Amy. Hello. Thank you, all of you. Well, so this is a great panel, and we've come to a great start already with Robert's presentation. I think it's really heartening to see livelihood and financing programs with energy working in conjunction in displacement contexts, so to start with this panel discussion, I thought that it would be best to start with Amy. And who could possibly give us a bit of a background on. And Amy, you've heard from me today and often before how in the regular development sector energy and livelihoods are often planned, and how some of the organizations look at it. But within, you have a larger outlook at Unidar about the training and resource needs for not only the energy sector but also the humanitarian sector, and to some extent the livelihoods sector as well. So it would be great to know from you what are the kind of capacities that are there. What is your view, and what do you think is good or missing, and what are the kind of tools do you think that could be brought in to maybe address some of this?
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Shab. I have a few slides maybe to outline the discussion. So
Sure.
Ranisha, if you want to go to the next slide, or I think you can end the following one. Yeah, and you can press it one more time. Yeah, so thanks, Shahab. Over the last around a year and a half, we've been running a training program actually to kind of address these gaps and the challenges that we've discussed a little bit today, and hopefully we'll in the next few minutes as well. But maybe just to give an overview, I think what we've seen is the kind of typical way of designing energy programs is coming a bit from a humanitarian mindset. So looking at procuring solutions, being a bit more technology focused, and then delivering them to communities. And what we're looking for, and I think what Andrea and Fazle will give us a better sense of in the examples following, is how to really kind of work through local systems and really develop kind of skills within local markets. And so we saw this really big need to actually support humanitarians to kind of switch the mindset to supporting local systems. And so that's why we've used the energy delivery models methodology, which is a methodology to co-plan energy access work with communities. And so you'll see on the slide, the kind of principles of that are being very end user driven, very similar to what you were mentioning earlier, Shahab. Co-creating and understanding what the livelihood needs of individuals and communities are, and then co-creating those solutions with them. Focusing on supporting local value chains, local businesses that are already in the setting, instead of coming in and delivering solutions kind of on top of that local capacity, and also focusing on sustainable finance and business models for looking at that sort of long-term change. So you'll see on the right, there's the Energy Delivery Models Canvas, which is this planning tool. And it really walks you through thinking about what the end user preferences, wants, needs, and capacities are, what the value proposition to switching to a new energy solution is, what the delivery structure is, so how that energy gets from the supplier to the end user, and then how to make that sustainable from a financial point of view. And it also is kind of looking at the enabling environment, so looking at really what policies and markets are surrounding that system. And then it's looking at, on the right, you see the things supporting activities, and that's really what kind of program designers can do to then basically, you know, provide energy solutions. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so 2 examples of how we've done this. So we've run the training 3 times actually last year with humanitarian practitioners to design these type of sustainable programs. And you'll see on the right, one was from Armenia. So they identified the barrier that rural businesses were not having access to energy, or they were having access or difficulty accessing finance to then buy renewable energy systems for their businesses. So instead of delivering the solutions to the businesses themselves, the solution they came up with was looking more through a financial inclusion approach. And then they subsidize basically access to renewable energy for the businesses. And the livelihoods outputs, they've basically improved their business outputs when once they've kind of gotten access to the renewable energy, and seen an increase in their income and their financials for their businesses. And then on the right, you'll see a project from Kenya, from Kakuma refugee camp. So the barrier or the need identified were that there were schools in Kenya, or in Kakuma, that were primarily using firewood to cook. And there was no really supply chains from setting up, like from the supplier to the end users. So the NGO that developed this project was looking at how to basically enable that supply chain. And so they're now supporting the piloting of electric pressure cookers. And they've already had a few results, and they're looking at kind of shorter cooking time, less air pollution, and everyone's saying that the food is tastier. So they've kind of enabled the suppliers to basically supply those to the end users. And now they're seeing an uptake in those. So those are 2 kind of developed through this methodology, and we see a really big need actually in this co-creation process with the communities for the sustainability of those projects. I think the final slide, Renisha. So briefly, the training tools are available. We have the methodology and the workbooks that people can work through to design projects on by themselves. And we have quite a few partners actually that can provide expertise and support while designing these projects. So that's a bit of an overview. And maybe to go back to your original question, Jahab, I think that tool, that framework of the design framework, has been really useful in helping think through and really question actually the mindset of designing projects. And I hope these tools are useful and available for other people who are looking to design such programs. We go back to you, Shahab, and on to Andrea to hear a really interesting delivery model.
Thank you, Amy. Maybe I'll come back with another question a little while later. But over to you, Andrea and Fazle. So we have Andrea and Fazle, who both implemented programs using energy access in their own respects in 2 different continents. One in the case of displaced communities through conflict, one through disaster. And it would be really good to hear from you both on the projects itself, but also the steps that you took and the kind of decisions that you made while you were going through this process as well. Thank you. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Shahab. I also have a quick presentation. So if you could please go to the next slides. All right, thank you. So I'm speaking to you on behalf of Human. Human is, might call it a startup, implemented in the framework of a program, of a development program, but with the goal to become a fully independent, for-profit company operating in the humanitarian space. We have incorporated the company in Ethiopia. Clearly not one of the easiest markets to do business, but definitely one of the most promising also for humanitarian settings. We have a patient international shareholder backing this initiative as well as the national ones. And the ambition is to become indeed the partner of choice for clean and sustainable energy access at 3 different levels: for humanitarian settings, so host and refugee communities, organization such as UN agencies, NGOs, or any other operator in the sector, as well as operations. By operation, I mean, for example, water distribution system or any other any activity in humanitarian settings that is in need of sustainable energy services. We are able to position ourselves by designing, financing, building, and operating these infrastructures. So we are somehow lifting like all these players from the burden of raising capital upfront. We have upfront an investment capital we can raise as long as we can find commercial viability. And I think this is one of the main challenges for such a venture, obviously, is to enter a humanitarian setting, showing that it can be attractive for private sector. They can provide long-standing services over like medium to long run, and those services can be paid for by the beneficiaries. Obviously, we aim at clean energy needs, carbon reduction, depends on the needs of each client. We mostly focus indeed on hybrid solar and PV mini grids, at least for the time being in Ethiopia. This is indeed for the case of the settlement. We do charge a prepaid on kilowatt-hour basis, so like any other mini grids on the market. And for organization and operations, we charge on a leasing model. We do provide turnkey solutions, which includes indeed fixed fees that are aimed to cover the upfront investment, as well as operation and maintenance over a specific period of time, which is usually agreed on case by case with our clients. The idea is also to overcome the lack of expertise that many of these humanitarian agencies might have to operate power systems, renewable power systems in their facilities or in their operations, by taking over this activity and just providing them with the turnkey solutions. Next. All right, so we're starting, indeed, as said, we are an Ethiopian company with a foreign capital. We're starting from the Somali area of Ethiopia. This is one of the biggest regions of the country, definitely one of the most unserved from a power supply. And we have 3 main areas for the next 18 to 24 months, and we are already indeed looking into what is considered for us the 3rd phase. We are focusing on a first solar PV mini grid of 300 kilowatt peak, which is currently undergoing detailed engineering. And we are indeed negotiating and discussing indeed with WFP and Mercy Corp itself to provide ESCO services under asset leasing model for their facilities. They are, half of them are off-grid, so they currently run on generators, and the idea is to phase them out in favor of sustainable energy solutions. Some are on-grid, but with unreliable supply, so we'll be able to provide backup services through solar system as well as battery storage. We'll expand in the Somali region. The Dolo Aldo area you see in the 2nd phase is a conglomeration of 5 camps of around 50,000 each. So there's a huge potential also to expand our market, as long indeed we find commercial viability. Farther, we'll move on to other regions of the countries, and the idea is to also expand beyond Ethiopia. Concretely, how do we sustain our business model? Next slide, please. We are indeed very much aware that mini grid serving households are hard to somehow sustain commercially. We have indeed identified there is an additional business model that we just discussed. We have captive users, such as UN agencies and other players, that provide somehow the base of our cash flow, followed by, for our first pilot, mini grid, proactive use hub, which is serving the host community. The host community will be not targeted by our mini grids for various reasons, mostly regulatory, but we'll be providing productive use hub, which is in the proximity and in which mostly millers, but other businesses will move onto in order to get a reliable 24 hours electricity. And last but not least, we're obviously looking and working together with the refugee community, which accounts for about 300 businesses. It's a very dynamic refugee community of 12,000 people. And you see in the icon, we just represented ice cream because despite being a desertic area, close to the Somali border, and very much like a rural and secondary area, it's striking to see how they do produce ice cream within the camp, mostly powered by diesel generators to serve the community. So this is one example of those businesses that we'll be supporting. This is just a bit of an overview of how we're going to move in the next 12 to 18 months. I'm happy to discuss with you in the panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Maybe I'll come back to that question after Fazli.
Yeah, thank you, Sahab. I also too have a small presentation. Sorry. So I'm representing Envo Renewable Energy Services Private Limited. It's a for-profit social enterprise working in the northeastern region of India, and we have been working in 4 thematic areas, that is basic lighting, health, education, livelihood, and also in disaster relief. So here to talk about what all our interventions in coming in the context of disaster relief. So first, to give you a context, why disaster relief in the northeastern region of India. So if you look into the map, the river Brahmaputra travels throughout the state of Assam for around 1,000 kilometers, and it passes through around 15 districts. And during rainy season, there is flood in this river because this river is very shallow and it carries a lot of silt. So every time the carrying capacity of this river goes down, and that causes massive flood throughout the state of Assam. And sometimes it comes for 2 to 3 months, 2 to 3 times in a year, and it creates heavy destructions. So we need to focus on providing relief. One is immediate relief and one is post-flood relief, because when there is infrastructure devastation, to revive the whole thing takes around 3 to 4 months of time. So people need support. So and when we are actually working in the field with our different grassroots level organizations who are actually working in disaster relief, it gives us, I mean, while we are working on the field only, it gives us various ideas what exactly can be the intervention that will actually benefit the society or to the people who are devastated from flood, and how those applications can actually be used as a livelihood generation activity for some micro entrepreneur at the time when there is no flood or during the winter days and all. So if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is how the scenario looks like when flood comes in the state of Assam. You can, the first 2 pictures, all the 4 pictures shows the how someone is actually just with his crops in midst of flood, then the house getting devastated, the lady nowhere to stay. And when we are talking about river Brahmaputra has small islands crossing through 15 districts. The biggest river island will have a population of around 200,000, and the smallest one will have approximately around few hundreds. So, and if you look into the total population, it will be more than 2 million population, which actually gets affected to the flood every year. Yeah, next slide, please. And we have been working with different grassroots level organizations who are providing disaster relief. And while working with them, we could see certain demands coming out from them, from their activity, which they have been doing it in the past. Like one of the organization has had a rescue boat to actually rescue people from flood. But when night comes in, they are not in a position to rescue anyone because it's completely pitch dark. So it was a very small intervention. We powered this rescue boat with solar, provided navigation lights, provided focus lights to actually navigate in the night time, and the accessibility of rescuing people became 24/7. And when there is no flood, the same boat can be used by that boatman to actually ferry people from the river island to the mainland, carrying emergency patients from the river island to the mainland, and there is a livelihood generation activity coming out of it, and he could earn from that particular activity. And the arrangement is such that during the flood time, he will give his boat, or he will be part of the rescue mission, and when there is no flood, he will be doing his regular activity of ferrying people, and he will have an income generation activity from it. Yeah, next slides, please. Yeah. So when flood comes, the grid gets completely cut off, and even for the government department to revive that infrastructure takes around 3-4 months time. And here we are talking about more than 2 million people staying in darkness for around 30 to 40 days, at least in the year when there is no electricity. And at that time, even availability of kerosene or candle also becomes scarce, because they are in an area where it is completely flood affected. For material to reach also takes time. So when we were working with our ground partners, so we felt integrated energy centers, if that can be installed in high-rise platforms or in places where the flood doesn't get affected, because there will be some pockets where water level will not rise so high. So if you could provide integrated energy centers in those places and provide charging stations for lighting solutions, for charging their torch lights, lights, high resolution lights, so that in the night time they can actually go and see about the well-being of their cattle, of their crops, so that the accessibility is there, because the people will definitely move to a high-rise platform. But what happens to the cattle? How exactly their safety is monitored? And if one from the family is displaced, the mobile network companies will definitely put the high-resolution towers, and they will provide services. But where exactly they will charge the mobile handsets? So that's exactly why integrated energy center plays a very important role, and this comes as an immediate relief to the people who are devastated with flood. And here, the people who will be running these integrated energy service centers actually gets developed as a micro entrepreneur, when after post flood he can use these lighting solutions or charging of mobile handsets or these high resolution headlamps, and can charge some rental out of it. And we are in the process of in that process actually we are developing micro entrepreneurs from this disaster response. Yeah, next slides please. Yeah, so if, as I have been talking about the previous slide, so they have cattle, and here in Assam, cattle mean mostly cows. They rear cows, and they sell the milk which is coming from the cow. But what happens during flood? They will be not in a position to transport this milk to the mainland to actually to sell this milk, and they will be losing around $60 per day. And to mitigate this kind of problems, what we thought, can we use value addition to the milk itself? So instead of selling raw milk, so can they provide some finished products of the milk, which has an immense market in this region. I mean, we in this eastern part of the country, we love eating sweets. So we have abundant market for finished sweet products. So what we have done, we have capacity built these people. We trained them, and we started making these sweets, which is on the bottom right hand side. So we are making these finished products, and these finished products are getting sold into the market. Yes, during the day, 30 to 40 days, they were losing $60 a day. But with the finished products, their income is actually getting generated to be double. So previously, if you're losing around $2,000 US dollars a month, by this selling these finished products, they can earn $4,000 in a month. So whatever they're losing it can actually, with this value-added finished products, they can match the income generation. Yeah, I think these are the 3 different case studies which we thought of actually highlighting it today. But with this, there are other many livelihood activities, like a simple solution integrated with IEC of laptop and a printer, where people can actually print their necessary documents, because when flood comes, there will be various relief uh, supports also which comes in from other agencies, also from government aids. For everything, they need documentary evidence that they are part of those particular place, and for that they need to print documents. So different other livelihood activities also falls in place. It's just that we need to work with the ground partners and find exactly what kind of solution will actually evaluate during disaster relief, and at a later time can also become an income generation activity for that particular area. So I will leave it here as of now, and then I'll take up more questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Fazle, and then thank you to all 3 of you for your presentations. And maybe go back to some of those questions. Now would be a good time for those. Maybe we could start with Andrea and your experience in planning this project that you've put together. If you'd like to highlight how what kind of while working in the displacement context, what are the typical challenges as an energy planner that one can foresee, and how you've gone about putting this entire project together and taking all of these different stakeholder needs into account. If you'd like to answer that.
Sure. Thank you, Shab. That's a good question. I think one of the main challenges we faced was during the demand assessment phase. As we start approaching refugees, what we've experienced is quite some reluctancy compared to other rural contexts to disclose financial means. One of the reasons might be indeed the fear of losing financial support from UN agencies. So we started approaching refugees to really understand their capability, capacity, and willingness to pay for services. They used to just somehow hide their such a capacity. It was only with over time, over like several months of assessment, where we basically built like a relationship with the refugees, and they built trust, that we were able to start entering these houses, that we've come to see the real wealth of such potential clients for us in terms of appliances. We find a quite strong penetration of washing machine, fridges, and other like appliances that you would normally do not expect in other rural areas, and even less so in refugee settings. I'm not saying this can be generalized. We're very lucky indeed to be able to operate in a very dynamic camp, which does a lot of cross-border trading, and we're mostly working with refugees from the Mogadishu area, so urban people with quite a strong entrepreneurial approach. But it definitely was a challenge. The good part was that our demand assessment and somehow showed like an even bigger need for demand for loads and for electricity over time. And obviously this has affected our design choices over time. And this also relates to the livelihood activities that have shown to be much more active and dynamic than we anticipated. And this was only possible as we built confidence and trust and a strong relationship, and especially as they start feeling that it was a commercial venture. So they feel that they have less somehow to maybe hide to get support. They understand the importance of commercial transaction, and they understand the fact that we are there to provide a service in exchange of a payment. And then we're both accountable, both the client and the service provider, in order to make it work.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Maybe next we could go to Robert, and thank you for being part of this, Robert, as well from DRC in Tanzania, and sharing that presentation with us. You've already implemented a host of livelihood solutions with financing specifically, and what would be really helpful to understand. You've already highlighted a few challenges and learnings, but what would be really interesting to I understand is a little bit more into on the ground working with communities. What are the kind of how do these programs actually play out when you look at livelihood, finance, and energy, and how do you bring all of these pieces together? Robert, did you? Sorry, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Would you like me to repeat?
Yes, actually, can you repeat, because you just stuck at some point. I can't get you
No,
nicely.
sure. Would be happy to. So we really appreciate that you presented to us regarding the programs that you've already conducted, and by bringing together finance, energy, and livelihoods, and 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 while we've now understood what kind of larger level actors are at play, and then how do you navigate between the larger facets of program planning, what would be great to understand from you is on the ground while working with communities, how do you bring in finance, livelihood building, and energy together? What are the kind of challenges and learnings that you have on that front, rather than a higher level programmatic front, but a more ground level front? How do you bring technology, finance, and livelihoods together, and what kind of steps have you taken to carry this out?
Okay. Thank you so much. Actually, I get you nicely. So I'll try to address accordingly based on the nature of our context here in Tanzania. As I say that while you were implementing the Phillips Foundation program, the solar energy program, actually we wanted to be the same kind as it was for microgrid, kind of where the refugees, they can have access even to electricity at household level. But I said in my presentations on the side of challenges, based on the government directives here in our context, actually it doesn't allow this kind of innovation or program which is related to kind of renting, or they can just pay as you go mechanisms. So that's a main challenge actually which we are facing here in Tanzania when it comes to the issue of working with the refugees. But for the host community population, it's just a little bit tricky compared to the refugees, because for the Phillips Foundation project, actually for the host community beneficiaries, when it comes to the issue of access to finance, actually we do have a lot of options, because we do have the saving groups, also the access to the form of financial services provider is actually available for the host community population. And these are some of the opportunities which are actually limited for refugees to have access to it. But for the host community, this is actually possible. They can even implement these IGAs which are related to utilization of this solar energy for the host community. This is very possible, and actually they've been doing. Even when it comes to the issue of this minor kind of maintenance, for the host community, actually this is something which is possible and doable for them, because they are running these businesses, they are getting income. Actually, we do have this, what we call the local technicians. These are the people from the same community who have been trained by Phillips, actually. So whenever this beneficiaries, they need any kind of maintenance, they utilize us actually, the IGS group, which are implementing their activities inside those solar containers. They can be able to facilitate any kind of support that needed when it comes to the minor kind of maintenance. So that's a general picture actually for the case of Tanzania. And then also at some point in our intervention, actually we do take into consideration the to ensuring the sustainability, actually the component of income continuity element. Most of the beneficiaries from this, most of our projects, particularly for people who are engaged in IGS activities from these solar containers, actually we link them with the formation of what we call the saving groups. This is a platform actually where they can save most of their income, they can just borrow, they can expand the scale of businesses. Yeah, so I think that's all from Tanzania. I think I've answered you nicely, Shah. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I think it helps all of us understand how finance can play a role within the livelihood and energy context to develop new enterprises and help communities keep it up, and also what are the ecosystemic conditions that enable or disable livelihoods and income and energy planning. Um, and and before I go back to Amy with the original question I had for her, we could hear from Fazle, who it would be great, Fazle, if you could help us understand, as an enterprise that wants to go out and deliver good solutions to communities that are in the position that they are in. What kind of support do you need as an enterprise to develop some of these solutions further and address further needs?
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. See, first and foremost thing, I mean, when in context to the disaster response, but when we are going and trying to provide different solutions, so we actually need to have a thorough understanding of what exactly is needed in the ground. So to actually work with some of the grassroots level enterprises who are actually working in the disaster relief work helps us a lot in actually providing the solutions to the people who needed it the most. One and the foremost, and with through them, because they have been working with those people in and out, so they are actually in a better position. So what exactly is the need? I mean, so if I have to give you a small example, I mean, in my slide when I was talking about the rescue boat, so we were just in general talking about. Then they were saying, yeah, we are doing different activities, providing health and hygiene kits to the flood affected people during flood time. Then providing rations because they don't have linkages to the market during that time. And they say, how you provide them? They say, we have a boat, we have a rescue boat. So, but then from the discussions only, it came out that they are not able to provide any rescue mission, be it rescuing people or providing any relief material during night time, because it's completely pitch dark. So from there, it came an idea. So what exactly we can do so that accessibility becomes 24/7. And from there, so then we had a thorough study of the boat, because technology wise also we need to find out whether what exactly the position of the boat to carry the extra weight, because during rescue time they will be bringing in people. So what is the what kind of extra weight it can take on, because the battery panel, inverter, everything actually comes into picture. And from there, then accordingly the designing of the system. So designing of the system and then creating a project proposal of getting the funding from it. So all those things plays an important role. And maybe once we get a fund for one particular rescue boat, how we can make it more sustainable, where we can showcase the success success out of it, and then more small micro entrepreneurs who already have these small country-made boats to ferry people is actually converting themselves, also bringing their boats also into this kind of model where they will provide rescue support during the flood time, for which whatever the technological intervention comes in, we will give them some kind of subsidized arrangement, and only thing which they need to provide is relief or rescue during the flood time, and the other time the same boat can then becomes a mode of communication for the people living in the river island during the night time. So different aspects plays a very important role to bringing in such stories together. So there has to be some kind of financial inclusion, and because these people come from and they are mostly becomes migrants, because every time there is flood they will have to relocate themselves to some other place, because the flood will take out the land and all. So different aspects plays important role. There has to be financial inclusion with microfinance, there has to be technological support, and technological support then with the ground organization support, and also at the same time there has to be a delivery model, successful delivery model from our side, which actually speaks for itself. Yes.
So I think what we know now is that there are a large number of different capacities that are needed that can bring a project together as well. Absolutely. So you're thinking finance, but you're also thinking technology, and then you're also thinking livelihoods, and you also want to understand the ground reality while still working, and also fundraising, where you might want to tap into local philanthropic capital that is available, or national or international. And all of these skills come together to deliver these kinds of programs. And with that, Amy, could you maybe help us understand what the current environment for this kind of project planning is like, in your opinion, and what do you think we can all do to contribute to that environment becoming stronger with more solutions, like we've heard already so many today, and it's so heartening to hear from everyone that's here. But how do we take this forward with people that are involved in this process?
Yeah, thanks, Shahab. Yeah, I think there's a few ways. I would say maybe the first is a bit of a shift in mindset. So I think often energy is maybe not super well understood generally in humanitarian contexts. So maybe shifting that mindset to see things a bit more through an energy lens, and also speaking with each other. So I know there's many livelihoods programs that get developed, but then trying to connect that to the energy access needs in different locations is really kind of one place to start. So really that mindset shift, thinking from maybe the humanitarian agency procuring and providing solutions, really to thinking actually, okay, how do we just support the local ecosystem? I think some skills needed are really around business model design. So it was really great to hear from Andrea about really that the incentive structures being there, both for the end users, the refugees, the businesses, those community members who see value in a service that's being delivered, and then have an incentive to purchase that, and then use it for the benefit of their lives, their well-being. And then also from the company side, to continue selling those services and being really user-driven. So I think looking at it really from an end user perspective, but also creating these business models that really work for all sides is really one place to go. And I think that's really enabled through partnership. I think the interesting thing as well about Andrea's presentation was really that this has been quite a partnership between a company, a humanitarian organization, and really the local community. And building those relationships is really essential. So I would say really focusing on partnership and co-creation will be also really essential, because I think if we don't bring all these perspectives together from the legal side, the engineering side, the humanitarian side, it's really difficult to do something that's really holistic and also, you know, meeting people's needs, but also financially sustainable in the long term. So yeah, I think that's some ways to go. That might be more questions than answers on how to, but I think really focusing on building partnerships and changing that mindset will really unlock a lot of new solutions.
Thank you, Amy, for articulating that for all of us. I think that helps us understand the starting point of the challenge that we face. And Andrea, there's a question for you from the audience. So maybe you could take that next, and then we can perhaps end with Robert. So Andrea, the question for you is: how do your interventions help extremely poor households create business entrepreneurship activities and generate self-employment, working within the finance, energy, livelihoods nexus? So how do you ensure that businesses are starting and are taking up the services?
Right, thanks. I have to say that indeed, as we engage more the community, probably one of our biggest concerns will be about probably to slow down business activities. We hope it's not the case indeed. I mean, indeed, obviously we're very picky on the sites we select, because exactly for that reason, we need to make sure there is potential for these livelihood activities, because I think we're all aware of the importance they have on the overall mini-grid economics. We're already moving indeed from, we're already bringing people to stop operating their car like generators. Some of them use them. Obviously, we do that through marketing approaches, which will include also some like some allowances of electricity, at least for the first few months of operation, to ensure that indeed there will be a stronger uptake, and they will also play as champions within the communities for the use of the services. In parallel, we are also partner with Mercy Corp, which also has some stakes in the company, and which has a component specifically designed around livelihood activities. So microfinance will intervene, obviously, and to support also for the uptake of more efficient, energy efficient tools and appliances. But it will be a constant dialogue, obviously, with all the beneficiaries, the operators, and the humanitarian agencies that is supporting us, to really make sure indeed, as Aima said, is a partnership between different partners that need to have sometimes diverging interests. The idea is, as long as we are all aware that we're all there on voluntary basis and we all need to make it work, which is exactly what we are trying to change indeed in the what we understood to be a bit somehow the mentality sometimes in refugee camps, that there's a bit of addiction to obtaining services without having anything in exchange. We are really just trying to change this paradigm, and even aspects such as we're setting up committees, obviously, to manage the relationship. And for example, committees are asking to be remunerated for their services. And while this might not be always considered to be the right approach, we do want to value the importance of services and that need to be remunerated. Obviously, as long as it works commercially for all of us. So the same will be for the livelihood activities. We're providing a service, but it needs to make as well as for us as well as the beneficiaries. Again, we want to be able to draw profit from this initiative and to reinvest this profit into market expansion. And I think the only way to make it work is to have happy clients, I guess.
Thank you, Andrea, and I think that this answers the question perfectly. Robert, before we go to you, there's a question from the audience to Fazle. How do you ensure sustain? So the question is similar in a certain sense. How do you ensure sustainability of these systems after disasters from a long-term point of view, in terms of operating the systems? What happens when they break down?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question actually. I mean, sustainability is what we all are working for. Yes. So when all these interventions are brought in, and one thing which we very rigorously follow is that when we are putting these systems, the operator or the person who is going to run the system has to be completely trained on the system. So as I was telling before, so we actually work with different ground partners. So ground partners identify such people because they have been closely working with those people, identify such people who will be trained and will also be part of our installation work, so that they completely know how exactly the whole system is installed. And throughout that process, our technical people will actually train them on smaller wear and tear, and so that most of the time this small wear and tear can be resolved over a phone call. And for bigger issues, that particular operator will be the focal point of contact with one of our technical person, who will then, we have our own norms, like if this is the distance from our respective office, so it will be it will be resolved within say 24 hours or 48 hours. That will be resolved. And because these people are going to earn some money out of it, so we have a proper record keeping book with them. So whatever is the revenue per month, it is coming out of it, and then he will have to park a certain amount of his money as a corpus to the ground partner, who will then create a recurring deposit account from where he will be earning some amount of getting some interest out of it also. So if after a certain warranty period, when there might be cases of replacement coming in, so he can use that particular corpus in buying in new equipments. And there is a responsibility of the ground partner. I mean, the ground partner is not just like they are working in the field and we are going and trying to find ways of providing interventions, because they will also be part and parcel of this whole ecosystem. It is their role also. There will be one focal point of contact at the ground partners level, who will go and do a random checking of the complete operation of that particular system once in every month, and they will have to provide us a report how the whole system is functioning. Even we also try to find out if we are supported, if suppose that person is supplying 30 lighting solutions on a rental basis, so whether all the 30 rental solutions are being catered to the people or not, whether that amount of revenue is coming or not. So all this record keeping maintenance, record keeping is also looked at. Yes. So that way we make it sure that it is sustainable and it is operated properly. And we could also have corpus for any replacement at the future time. Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Fazle. I think this was a really good example of how at a project level we can ensure that all systems are in place and considerations are being made. So Robert, there's a question for you from the audience as well. So maybe you could take a minute or two to answer this question. And then the last question, which is for everybody in the audience. Andrea, there's a few more questions for you, but maybe we'll have to take them offline, or you could reply on the chat. These two questions are, and that's to you, Andrea. Just hang on. Yeah, as a business operating in the sector means that you are taking on a big security issue. Do you think that this is a deterrent for private sector involvement in the HE sector? Was that okay, Andrea?
Yeah, if I can understand well,
if you could,
how we handle.
If you could. Sorry, Andrea, if you could maybe answer that in the chat, I'd like to maybe go ahead with Robert, and then the final question to all of you would be, what is the one line of advice, really quickly, just in a line from all of you. But Robert, your question for the energy programs for the ICT hub, who is responsible for long-term maintenance, and then how do you also deal with behavioral change required, if any, for uptake of activities? So that's the question for you. But Andrea, how do you deal with security? If you could answer that in the chat. And also, yeah, I think that's about it. So sorry for the confusion. And Robert, please go ahead.
Okay.
So Robert, your
Okay, thank
question
you.
was how do you deal with behavioral change, and how do you ensure long term?
Okay, thank you, Shahab. Actually, as I say that, as we all know that the issue of behavior change is not an overnight kind of a thing, and particular for the communities which we are working with, as I say that in our context here, actually the main source of energy has been the issue of firewood. So that's why we've been introducing a quite number of interventions around alternative sources of energy, such as the issue of biobrigade production. But based from our experience since last year, actually we saw that the rate of adoption is actually now increasing, and that's why the demand for this kind of interventions in our context here, it has been even increasing. That's why I say that we saw that one of the challenges which we are facing in our context here is the needs, actually they are very high compared to the current support. Is because that now the population has already seen that the need for having alternative sources of energy is now very high, and they've even saw the importance of using this kind of innovations, because we are also experiencing this the changes in weather patterns actually, and then this affect the whole community in large. So that's why now people they've just changed their behaviors, and then hopefully actually as the time goes on, the whole community actually they just adopt into these green initiatives. So that's what I can just try to address as of now. Thank you, Shahab.
Thank you, Robert. What is your one line of advice to all of the planners that are on this meeting and designers that are there on this meeting? What's the one line of advice for carrying out such programs? We could come back to you. Amy, would you maybe want to go ahead, and then we can say goodbye as well. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, thanks. I would just say, from when designing and looking at energy and livelihoods programs, really think long-term from the start and really design with sustainable business models in mind. Thanks, Shahab. Do you want to do a roundtable of one-liners?
And yes.
Maybe, yeah, pass it to Andrea.
Apologies, can you repeat? I'm just trying to follow on the chat.
Line or a couple of lines on.
I'm on the chat. If you can repeat, indeed, sorry, the question.
Sorry, what advice would you give to your fellow colleagues on this call who would like to maybe learn from your experience? What's the one line or two of advice?
Right. I think, like, indeed, my advice is, we still perceive the humanitarian sector as with like provisional, not there to stay, and therefore not worth investing onto. Truth is, most camps are there, will be there in the next 20 years, and on a market point of view, is kind of a virgin market with very few competitors. For those who are brave enough to perceive this risk of provisionality, like provisional nature, to be somehow something that can be overcome, I think there's a lot that can be done to serve communities.
And thank you, Andrea. Fazle, any piece of advice from last one?
Yeah, I will definitely go with what Amy has said. I mean, we all should work for sustainable business model, and also at the same time we all are working in different parts of country, maybe sharing of best practices, because something which someone else is practicing somewhere there may actually work for us, and in vice versa. So I think we all should together work for the development of this particular ecosystem. So it should be more of a cohesive group. Yes, right. Thank you.
That's wonderful to hear. And Robert, back to you for the final thoughts.
Yes,
Robert, if you could give us
yes,
a last piece of advice to the community.
Okay. Actually, for me, I would like to advise to ensure the sustainability for this kind of interventions for both in a humanitarian setting as well as for the development-oriented kind of. We have to ensure that engagement actually for the private companies, it has to be very high, and the introduction of these different business model so as to keep the system ongoing by itself. So that's from me.
Thank you so much, all of you. It was a very learnings-driven session and lots of examples, and I'm sure that the audience found it very beneficial. Thank you. Over to you, Ranisha.
Thank you so much, Shahab, and to a lovely panel. We learned a lot. I'm pretty sure the audience also learned, depending on all the questions that came in. And after this engaging discussion, we are towards the end of the webinar. And before we say goodbye, a lot of points that we were discussing today about private sector involvement, finance, we are going to dive deeper into our third webinar, where we will dive deeper into ecosystem. So I invite all of you to register for that webinar. The link is again dropped in the chat. We will also send out a follow-up email today or tomorrow, where you'll have access to the recording from today and also the presentations. So a huge thank you to our audience for staying with us till the end. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at info@energypedia.info. I wish you a good afternoon, and thank you to all our panel one more time, and have a good day, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.